Claire Lynn drew a slow breath. Her fingertips trembled, but her voice came out strangely steady, like a blade sliding from its sheath. "Adrian," she said into the phone, "I've thought it through. I'll divorce Ethan, and after that, I'll marry you. I'll be your wife, and I'll be Luna's mother." The mansion around her was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel like a verdict. The grandfather clock on the wall exaggerated each second, swinging time back and forth as if it enjoyed watching her bleed. Claire lowered her gaze to the old business card she'd kept hidden in her drawer. The corners were soft and from being rubbed, folded, straightened, and rubbed again. She keyed in the familiar number with the careful precision of someone dialing her own fate. The call connected after 2 rings. A man's voice came through, low and calm, carrying that quiet gravity that didn't need to raise itself to be heard. "Claire?" She closed her eyes once, gathering every loose piece of her heart. "Yes, it's me." A soft, almost wistful laugh. "I remember the first time you called. I told you to divorce, and you refused. You said you wouldn't leave your husband. You wouldn't abandon your son." Claire's smile barely formed before it faded, thin as mist. "I was stubborn. I thought love could outlast neglect. And now?" She stared at the white ceiling, every word she spoke landing like a cut. "I need a month to finish the paperwork. When it's done, I'll come to you." A pause. When Adrian spoke again, his gentleness made her throat tighten. "Will it be hard? If you need help, say so. I don't mind standing against anyone." Claire shook her head, even though he couldn't see. "No. Divorcing Ethan might be the easiest thing I've done in all the years I've been his wife." She didn't say the rest out loud. That Ethan had never really loved her, that he had never once looked at her life as if it mattered. "Thank you," she whispered. "I can handle it." The line clicked dead. Before she could even set the phone down, footsteps sounded on the stairs. She knew the cadence, the way you know the sound of your own name being called. Ethan Shaw descended with their son, Leo, his small hand swallowed by Ethan's larger one. Father and son looked like they'd been carved from the same cold, perfect mould. Same sharp brow, same distant eyes, and same effortless cruelty that came from never having to wonder if they'd be forgiven. Ethan's gaze flicked to her like she was an inconvenience someone forgot to remove. "How many times do I have to tell you? When I'm on a work call, don't make noise." Leo frowned and looked at her with the strange, practiced disappointment of a child who'd learned early how to mimic his father. "Who were you calling? You were so loud I couldn't even focus on my reading." Once that would have sent Claire scrambling, apologies spilling from her mouth, her hands already reaching to fix an offence she didn't understand. Once she would have swallowed her pride, because peace in this house depended on her becoming smaller. But today she simply sat straighter. She picked up the 2 folders on the coffee table and slid them across to them with polite, lethal calm. "There are 2 documents I need signatures on. One is—" Ethan's phone rang. Claire's chest tightened at the ringtone. He'd never used it for anyone else. Only one person had earned a sound that could melt his face into softness. Ethan answered instantly. "Yeah, I'm listening." His voice gentled so quickly it made Claire feel as if she'd imagined his cruelty. "Okay, I'm coming right now." Leo's eyes lit up. "Dad, it's Vivian, right? I want to go see Vivian too." Ethan nodded, already turning away from Claire as if she'd stopped existing mid-sentence. "Go. Change your shoes." They moved toward the door, father and son in sync, not once asking what she needed, not once glancing at the folders she'd placed, like a quiet bomb between them. Claire held the documents out again, her voice still even. "These still need to be signed." Ethan finally paused, irritation creasing his perfect face. More pointless paperwork. If it's about the car or the house, stop dragging me into it. Next time, just sign for me. And then he left. The front door slammed with a finality that felt like the house exhaling. Claire stared at the empty space they'd left behind and tasted the phrase he'd used as if it were poison, not important. In their eyes, was it the paperwork that wasn't important? Or was it her? Because she wasn't important, everything she brought to them could be waved away with casual contempt. Because she wasn't important, the things that mattered to her were always treated like dust. She glanced down at the folders. One was the divorce petition. The other was consent for Leo to live with his father. Maybe this was what they'd always wanted. The marriage had never been Ethan's choice. Years ago, Claire had been a scholarship girl supported by the Shaw family. She'd fallen in love at first sight with Ethan's bright, gifted arrogance, a son she could never touch. She'd watched him love Vivian Shen with the kind of intensity that made other people feel like background noise. They fought. They broke up. Vivian left the country. Ethan drank one night, mistook Claire for someone else, and dragged her into the centre of a story that had never written her name. Pregnancy followed like a cruel miracle. Ethan married her because he had to. Claire entered the marriage with a bouquet of illusions and spent years calling it devotion. And then her mother died. Ethan said the company was too busy. Leo said he had an exam. Neither came to the funeral, but both had time to pick Vivian up from the airport the day she returned. Claire came back from burying her mother and opened the freezer to find the last dumplings her mother had made her gone. Because Vivian had said, lightly, "I've been craving dumplings." That night, Claire sat on the kitchen floor with an empty plastic bag and cried until the bottom of her soul went dry. Something inside her went silent afterward, like a candle snuffed so completely not even smoke remained. Now she understood what Adrian had offered her months ago, the day she'd found his niece lost in a mall. Little Luna Night had clung to Claire like she recognised safety. Adrian had thanked Claire with careful sincerity, keeping a respectful distance as if he feared even his gratitude might offend her. He told her Luna was autistic, terrified of strangers, never affectionate with anyone. And yet Luna had held on to Claire and refused to let go. Hope had flickered in Adrian's eyes, fragile and rare. He'd asked her, very seriously, "If one day you're no longer bound to your marriage, would you marry me? Would you be Luna's mother?" Back then, Claire had refused without thinking. Husband, son, duty, the lie that they needed her. Today, the lie lay in pieces at her feet. Claire uncapped a pen. She signed her name on both documents, each stroke calm as a severed chain. Then she placed the folders neatly into the study drawer like a final ritual. 1 month. That was all she needed. 1 month, and she would be free. That evening, Ethan and Leo didn't come home until late. Claire didn't sit on the couch waiting, heart dangling like bait. She packed. She kept only a small suitcase, a few worn clothes, a couple of books, photos tucked in a notebook. Everything else she treated like a past life she refused to worship. When the door opened, Ethan came in with Leo, and Vivian behind them in a cream dress, her makeup perfect, her smile soft as a knife wrapped in velvet. Leo saw the garbage bag in Claire's hands and frowned. "What are you throwing away?" Claire looked up, eyes flat, with a calm that didn't ask permission. Just useless trash. No one reacted. Only she knew what she meant. The memories she'd once held like treasures. The years she'd spent begging silently to be seen. Then Ethan's expression shifted. He strode into the bedroom and seconds later stormed back out. face dark. "Where's the stuff from my drawer?" Claire blinked. "I didn't touch your things. You've always made your boundaries clear. I respected them." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "Then why are Vivian's letters gone?" It was the first time in years he looked truly angry at her. Not because she'd cried alone at her mother's funeral. Not because she'd collapsed from exhaustion. Not because she'd been shut out in the rain. But because love letters from another woman had been misplaced. Vivian stepped forward with careful surprise. "What letters?" She tilted her head, sweetly fascinated. "The ones we wrote back when we were together. Ethan, you kept them?" Ethan didn't answer. He went to the trash can, grabbed it, and flipped it over. Garbage spilled across the living room floor. Fruit peels, crumpled packaging, damp paper. The man who hated dust crouched down without hesitation and dug through it with bare hands, face tight, intent, unbothered by the stench. He found the bundle at the bottom, yellowed letters tied neatly together. He stood and walked toward Claire, every step landing like weight on her ribs. He held the letters up like evidence. "Here," he said, the voice low with rage. "This is what you call not touching my things?" Claire's mind went blank. She truly hadn't touched his drawer. She didn't know how the letters had ended up in the trash, but the scene had already chosen its villain, and it was always easier for them when it was her. Leo stepped closer, not to defend her, but to judge her. "Do you even know what privacy is?" His chin lifted, boyish voice and sharpened by borrowed cruelty. "You lost them, and you still lied. I'm embarrassed to have a mother like you." Embarrassed. The word struck her like a slap she felt in her teeth. Vivian sighed softly, the sound of someone pretending to be kind. Claire is probably just upset about the past, but jealousy makes people blind, doesn't it? She smiled with that gentle, superior pity. "Don't let your emotions affect Leo. Children learn so easily." Claire tried to speak, but the 3 sets of eyes on her split her words before they formed. Ethan's suspicion, Leo's contempt, Vivian's fake compassion. "Enough," Ethan cut in, and shoved Claire towards the front door. Her shoulder hit the handle. Pain flashed bright. "Stand outside for a day," he said, cold and decisive. "When you're ready to admit you were wrong, then you can come back in." The heavy door slammed in her face. Through the glass, she watched them return to warmth. Yellow light kissed their faces. Ethan's expression softened toward Vivian in a way Claire had never received in all her years as his wife. Leo leaned against Vivian's shoulder and accepted fruit from her hand with obedient sweetness. A perfect family of 3, and Claire, soaked in the dark. Haka was nothing but the extra character no one wanted in the frame. Rain came down like punishment, autumn rain, sharp and icy, soaking her hair and clothes until she felt like she'd been dipped in cold steel. She didn't knock, she didn't beg. Not because she didn't hurt, but because she needed to see it clearly, all the way through, until illusion had nowhere left to hide. Lights turned off one by one inside the house. Living room, hallway, upstairs bedroom. The last light died, and with it, the last soft lie she'd been living on. Her vision blurred, her body shook. The old C-section scar throbbed with a deep, ugly pain. When she finally collapsed, it felt like falling into a bottomless dark. When she woke, she was in her bed. Antiseptic lingered in the air. The family doctor stood near the door, speaking to Ethan. "Mister." "Sure," the doctor said with restrained frustration. "Your wife had severe complications when she gave birth. Her body never fully recovered. This kind of exposure can be dangerous. Honestly, it doesn't look like she's been cared for properly." Ethan stood tall and expressionless. "Fine." It won't happen again. And Promise said because it was expected, not because it meant anything. The doctor left. The door clicked shut. Ethan turned to Claire, saw her open eyes, and spoke as if reporting the weather. The housekeeper said she threw the letters away by accident while cleaning, so it was a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, no apology, no regret. As if locking her outside in the rain until she fainted was a small miscalculation. Before Claire could respond, Leo poked his head in, face impatient. Since you're awake, get up and cook. The food the staff makes tastes awful. Vivian wants to try your cooking too. Oh, and she's allergic to seafood, so don't make anything with it. Claire stared at him. Her proud, brilliant boy who could remember another woman's allergies, another woman's cravings, another woman's smile, but had never once asked what his own mother liked, what she feared, what she could no longer bear. She said nothing. She got out of bed barefoot and went to the kitchen. An hour later, the table was filled with steaming dishes. Vivian praised her with a smile that sounded like mockery. Ethan and Leo barely nodded. Then their faces changed as they noticed the soups. Ethan frowned. Why did you make so much soup? You know I never drink soup. Leo pushed his chopsticks down. And you know I like spicy food. This is bland. I'm not eating it. Claire sat, hands still faintly trembling, and didn't defend herself, because the answer was already written. Ethan didn't like soup, but Adrian did. Adrian was the kind of man who asked, "Are you tired?" and made her warm honey water with his own hands while reading documents late into the night. Leo liked food that burned his tongue, but Luna ate only mild flavours, her eyes watering if anything was too sharp. From now on, Claire wouldn't cook for the Shaw men. She would cook for someone else. She would become someone else's wife, someone else's mother. Ethan mistook her silence for sulking. "You're still angry about last night. It was a misunderstanding, Claire. I thought you weren't the type to act childish." Claire exhaled, a small, quiet breath that tasted like the end of a life. In his eyes, she was supposed to be obedient, patient, soft, a shadow that came when called and disappeared when ignored, a woman without pride, without pain, without limits. She had been that shadow for years, and she was done. The next day, she didn't go to the hospital to see Leo. She didn't call. She didn't text. Not because she didn't love him, but because, for the first time, she was learning what it meant to stop dying for people who had already decided she was not important. Claire still knew how Leo was doing, not because anyone bothered to tell her, and certainly not because Ethan remembered she existed. She knew because Vivian Shen was diligent, almost proud, about updating the world on their happiness. A child's crayon drawing with bright, crooked hearts. Caption: "Someone made this for me today." A photo of 3 heads bent over comic books on a hospital bed, their shoulders touching like they belong together. Caption: "The simplest moments are the warmest." A final picture that made Claire's stomach turn. Vivian sitting beside the bed, Leo leaning against her shoulder with his eyes half closed, Ethan standing behind them. The light in the room was honey gold, soft enough to make even betrayal look holy. Every post carried the same 4 words, loud and unmistakable: a family of 3. Ethan's friends flooded the comments with hearts and blessings. So sweet. This is what real happiness looks like. Handsome husband, brilliant son, beautiful wife. What a perfect match. May your family be blessed for a lifetime. Vivian never corrected them, never once typed, "I'm not the legal wife." Instead, she replied with intimate warmth, the way the owner of a home replies to compliments about her house. And the cruelest detail of all, under every post, Ethan and Leo both pressed like. Claire watched it with a strange calm, like someone watching the final act of a play she'd already walked out of. The pain still rose, of course, but it rose in a body that had finally stopped running towards the knife. The day Leo was discharged, Claire didn't go. She had made a decision that felt like stepping out of a burning building and locking the door behind her. She would not lower herself to beg. She would not pour another drop of tenderness into hands that always let it spill. 1 month, the cooling off period, the divorce papers, then her suitcase, her own name, and the silence she had been denied for years. The house that had once been her prison no longer had anything that could hold her. And yet, that afternoon, her phone rang. "Mom," Leo said as soon as she answered, his voice sharp with grievance, as if her absence was a crime. "Why didn't you come pick me up from the hospital?" Claire almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so familiar it had become absurd. "Didn't you have Vivian?" she asked softly. "I'm not exactly a qualified mother in your eyes, remember. Don't force it." There was a pause. Then Leo's irritation flared like a match. "Are you still mad about last time? I only said that because Dad was really angry. Vivian is timid. She can't handle being yelled at. I was protecting her." He spoke like he was giving Claire wise advice, like she was the childish one and he was the adult. "Mum, you survived a difficult birth, right? You almost hemorrhaged. Compared to that, what's one small misunderstanding? Darcy, it's nothing." The words landed straight on the scar Claire wore in her body and in her life. She remembered vomiting so violently during pregnancy she almost collapsed in class. She remembered refusing medication because she feared it would harm the baby, retching until bile burned her throat, until blood flecked the sink. She remembered the labour that dragged her into darkness, the blood loss that left her shaking, the stitches that pulled and screamed every time she moved. She remembered getting up anyway, because her baby wouldn't take a bottle, because he cried, because she was his mother, and that meant pain was never an excuse. She had believed, stupidly, that a child grown from your flesh would one day look at your suffering with tenderness. But in Leo's mouth, her injuries had become proof she should be able to endure anything, especially being blamed for what she didn't do. Claire laughed then, and the sound cracked. Tears ran down her face, hot and humiliating, as if her body was still trying to cling to something her soul had already released. She didn't argue, she didn't explain. She ended the call. Leo called again and again. Messages poured in like a flood, annoyed, demanding, then pleading in the way only children who are used to obedience can plead. It wasn't love. It was inconvenience. Finally, exhausted by the noise, Claire blocked his number. The silence that followed felt like air returning to a room she'd been suffocating in for years. She thought that would be the end of it. But not long after, her phone rang again. This time it was Ethan's assistant. "Mrs. Shaw," the man said without greeting, as if she were a service line. "Mr. Shaw's stomach pain is bad. Make the nourishing soup you usually make and bring it over. No respect. No question. Only the habit of ordering her into her old place. A year ago, hearing bad stomach pain would have jolted Claire into motion. She'd roll up her sleeves, light the stove, check the pantry, boil the herbs, set alarms for the medicine. She'd worry until she made herself sick. Today, she looked out the window at the rain slashing down like punishment and felt nothing but a weary chill. "No," she said. The assistant fell silent, unprepared for the word. Claire's voice stayed light, almost polite. "I'm not making it. Not now. Not ever again. Don't call me about this." She hung up before he could recover. Then, to protect the fragile quiet she'd fought for. She powered off her phone and tossed it onto the bed. The room became a rare sanctuary. No ringtone, no demands, no invisible leash around her throat. For the first time, she could turn away from Ethan's pain the way he had turned away from hers. She pulled the blanket up and slept. It wasn't a perfect sleep, but it was hers. Sometime after midnight, someone grabbed her shoulder and shook hard. Claire surfaced from the depths like a drowning woman. She opened her eyes to the bedside lamp's harsh glow and Ethan sitting on the edge of her bed like he owned it. His face was dark, the lines of it carved from anger and entitlement. His eyes pinned her with cold disbelief. "You can sleep," he bit out. "You actually slept." His voice went lower. "Dangerous. Don't you know I'm in pain? How can you sleep when I'm like this?" Claire blinked slowly, letting her vision clear. Ever since Leo's birth, they'd had separate rooms. Ethan never stepped into hers. This bedroom, and the woman in it, had been treated like a forgotten wing of the mansion, a place without meaning. And yet tonight, he barged in without hesitation, as if her space was his whenever he needed to vent his discomfort. Claire sat up against the headboard. Her expression was calm to the point of frost. "I know," she said. Her voice was the tone of someone discussing weather. "If your stomach hurts, take medicine. Isn't that what you've always done?" For the first time in years, Ethan's face showed something other than controlled indifference. Shock. It was almost comical. How one drop of his own coldness returned to him could look like cruelty in his eyes. He rubbed his brow, frustrated, as if she had broken a rule he'd never had to speak aloud. "Are you still mad about what happened?" he demanded. "It's obvious you weren't careful with Leo. That's why he got hurt. I yelled a little, but I didn't even punish you. What more do you want?" The words were presented like objective truth, but the meaning was plain. "I spared you. Be grateful." This was where Claire used to crumble. This was where she used to cry and apologise and carry soup to his bedside like repentance. This was where she used to build him a staircase of excuses so he didn't have to climb down from his pride. But Claire simply looked at him, her eyes unnervingly still. "Think whatever you want," she said. The sentence was light, yet it sliced the air clean in half. Ethan's jaw tightened, his face darkened further. It's as if her refusal to beg was a personal insult. He stood abruptly and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The conversation ended like a dying candle. Claire lay back down. No guilt rose, no panic, no desperate need to chase him down and fix things. Winter was coming, and for the first time, her days became busy in a way that belonged to her. She spent her evenings knitting scarves and sweaters for Adrian Knight and little Luna. Luxury brands could sell warmth with price tags, but Claire knew something different. Warmth made by hands carried time, intention, and a quiet kind of promise. On Luna's scarf, Claire stitched small animals Luna liked, an awkward black cat, a shy rabbit, a crooked star. The embroidery wasn't perfect, but it softened something inside Claire every time she looked at it. She heard Adrian had struggled with insomnia for years, often working until dawn. Claire researched sleep-supporting herbs, visited traditional shops, asked careful questions, mixed a blend herself. She tested it first, just to be sure it wouldn't be harsh. It worked. Her sleep came easier. She was trimming yarn, the faint herbal scent drifting through the living room like dry grass warmed by sun. When the front door opened, Ethan returned with Leo. They saw her bent over her work on the sofa and automatically assumed she was preparing gifts to apologise, because that was how their world worked. Claire made mistakes. Claire paid for them. Claire returned to her place. Ethan's expression softened a fraction, the way a king relaxes when the servant kneels. "If you know you were wrong," he said, almost generously, then stop being childish." Claire didn't look up. She didn't explain that the scarf wasn't for them, that the herbs weren't for him, that her hands were working toward a future where she wasn't a ghost in her own house. She let him perform his assumptions, all by himself. When she didn't respond, Ethan's gaze sharpened, discomfort flickering. Then he moved on, as if her silence was merely a delay. "Tomorrow is Vivian's birthday," he announced, like he was reading a schedule. "I booked dinner at night banquet. Get ready. Dress properly." Claire's knitting paused. The yarn slipped from her fingers, falling softly into her lap. She lifted her head and looked at them, father and son, so alike in their certainty, so blind in their comfort. "Tomorrow," she echoed. "Right." Ethan nodded, not noticing the shadow settling in her eyes. "What?" Leo chimed in, impatient. "What about tomorrow? Mum, do you have something to do?" Then he answered for her, as if her life didn't deserve to interrupt theirs. "Whatever it is, postpone it. Vivian's birthday is the most important." Claire's lips curved into a thin, almost gentle smile. "Okay," she said. "A birthday, yes, very important. Important enough that both her husband and her son had forgotten. Tomorrow was also the day she was born, and the universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. "Claire!" Ethan's voice cracked on her name like it didn't recognize itself anymore. For half a heartbeat, he looked almost human, like a man staring at the wreckage of a life he had been sure would never move without him. His fist was still clenched, his chest rose and fell too fast. His eyes were bloodshot, not from sleeplessness alone, but from something uglier, panic wearing the mask of rage. Claire didn't answer. She didn't even grant him the mercy of a full glance. She was already kneeling on the polished floor, both hands steady, as she helped Adrian sit up. The corner of Adrian's mouth was smeared red. Not much, just enough. Just enough to make the whole room tilt in Claire's favour. "Are you dizzy?" she asked Adrian, her voice tight with anger she had no intention of swallowing. "Can you stand?" Adrian's lashes lowered. "I'm fine," he murmured. Then, almost imperceptibly, his hand brushed her wrist, as if to reassure her. His voice softened, careful. "Don't worry, I'm okay." The "don't worry" landed like a match in Ethan's lungs. He stepped forward, the chair scraping behind him. "This is between me and him," Ethan said, each word forced through clenched teeth. "Claire, come here." Claire finally lifted her eyes, not to obey, to cut. "You don't get to command me anymore," she said, calm, clear. The way a judge speaks when the verdict is already written. "And if you raise your hand again, I'll call security and the police. Try me." The restaurant had fallen into a stunned hush. Forks paused mid-air, glasses hovered near lips. Even the soft background music suddenly felt too loud, too cheerful for the scene unfolding. Ethan stared as if he'd never seen her before, as if he had expected her to be the same woman who apologised even when she bled. "Police?" he scoffed, but it came out thin. "Claire, you're my—" "Don't," she interrupted, and there was ice in it. "Don't say that word like it means something sacred to you. You didn't treat it sacred when you put someone else in my place and called it family." Ethan's jaw tightened. The vein in his temple throbbed. Adrian shifted slightly, bracing himself on one hand. He looked up at Ethan with measured composure, as if Ethan's rage was just weather. "Mr. Shaw," Adrian said quietly, "sit down." The calmness was infuriating. Ethan's eyes snapped to him. "You have no right to speak to me." Adrian tilted his head. "In public, In a restaurant? I do. You assaulted me in front of witnesses. He wiped the corner of his mouth with a napkin, slow and deliberate. And more importantly, you frightened my wife. Ethan's breath hitched at the word, wife. It wasn't the first time he'd heard it today, but hearing it in Claire's presence, seeing her not deny it, was like watching someone else sign their name on what he thought belonged to him. You're lying, Ethan said, voice low and shaking. She's still legally married. Claire's gaze didn't waver. Not for long. 4 words, soft as falling snow, sharp as glass. Ethan's face changed, the anger briefly giving way to a stunned emptiness. What did you just say? Claire stood up slowly, still keeping her body between Ethan and Adrian like a shield. Her spine was straight, her hands were steady. She didn't look like a woman trying to win an argument. She looked like someone closing a door. I said not for long. She lifted her chin. The cooling off period ends. Today. Ethan's mouth opened, then shut. Like his mind couldn't catch up to the fact that time had moved while he wasn't paying attention. You can't, he whispered. And for a second it wasn't pride talking. It was fear. Claire, Leo. You don't get to use him as a chain, she said. You let him learn that I was optional. You watched while he called me unworthy. You liked Vivian's posts. You smiled when the world mistook her for his mother. Ethan's eyes flashed. Vivian has nothing to do with this. Claire's laugh was short, humourless. Of course she does. She has everything to do with it. She just didn't have to lift a finger. You and Leo did the work for her. Ethan's gaze darted around, as if searching for allies in the crowd, as if a stranger's sympathy could stabilise him. Then, like a delayed explosion, his composure shattered. Claire, he said again, louder now, desperate. Come home. We can talk. We can fix this. Fix. The word was almost insulting, as if she were a broken appliance. Claire leaned forward just a fraction. Her voice dropped until it was intimate. Dangerous. You don't fix what you never cared to build. She turned to Adrian. Can you stand? Adrian nodded, and this time when he rose, he did it slowly, with a visible wince. Just enough to make anyone watching feel protective. He didn't cling to Claire. He didn't dramatise it. He simply let her be there. And Ethan saw what it meant to be chosen without begging. That was what finally made him lose control. He reached out as if to grab Claire's arm, but Adrian moved first, stepping between them with a firm, quiet hand raised, not to strike, but to block. A wall without violence. Don't touch her, Adrian said, voice still even, but colder now. Ethan froze, his hand hovering in the air like a crime caught mid-act. Claire's eyes narrowed. Do it, she said softly. Touch me. Give me one more reason. Ethan's fingers curled into a fist again, but this time he lowered it. His face twisted with humiliation, fury, and something that looked too much like grief. Claire, he rasped, you're doing this because you're jealous, because you're angry. You'll regret it. Claire's expression didn't change. I regret staying, not leaving. She turned and walked away with Adrian, her steps steady, her shoulders squared. Ethan stood alone by the table, breathing hard, like a man who had run after something his whole life, only to realise he didn't know how to hold it once it stopped running. Outside, the afternoon sunlight hit Claire's face. She blinked against it, not because it hurt, but because it felt unfamiliar, like warmth that didn't demand payment. Adrian guided her toward the car, his hand hovering near her back without forcing contact. When they reached the curb, he finally spoke, voice low. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean for it to become a scene. Claire looked at him, searching his face. You didn't start it, she replied, and you didn't escalate it. You protected me. Adrian's gaze softened. That's my job. Her throat tightened at the word my. Then, from behind them, a voice rang out, high, cracked, frantic. Mom! Claire stopped. Her body reacted before her mind could, like an old reflex. She turned. Leo stood at the restaurant entrance, cheeks streaked, eyes swollen and bright with panic. He looked smaller than his age, smaller than the pride he always wore like armour. His arms were blotched with red rashes again, worse, angry patches climbing his neck. He ran toward her, stumbling, and for a second Claire saw the child he used to be, the one who once clutched her finger in the sleep. But then she remembered the other child, Luna, curled on her chest, whispering, Mom, don't cry. Claire's face held. Her heart did not rush forward the way it used to. Leo reached her and grabbed at her sleeve. Mom, please. Claire stepped back, gently but firmly freeing herself. Leo's eyes widened and something in him broke. I didn't mean it, he choked. I didn't mean what I said. I just thought you would always forgive. Claire finished for him, not cruelly, but truthfully. Always stay? Always come running no matter what you did? Leo's lips trembled. He nodded like a child caught stealing. Behind him, Ethan appeared, his face pale, eyes wild with restraint. He stopped a few steps away, not daring to reach for her again. Claire looked from father to son, two people who had been her whole world, and she felt, with startling clarity, how small that world had been. Leo's voice cracked. Come home. Please, I need you. Claire held his gaze. I needed you too, she said quietly. For years. Leo flinched as if struck. Mum? Claire shook her head once. I'm not your convenience. I'm not your nurse. I'm not your apology machine. Leo's tears fell faster. Vivian said you have a new kid, he blurted, voice sharp with fear. She said you don't want me anymore. Claire's eyes narrowed. The name landed like rot. Adrian's hand hovered again, closer now, steady, grounding. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Claire looked at Ethan. So she's still telling stories. Ethan's throat bobbed. He didn't answer, because he couldn't. Claire turned back to Leo. Her voice softened, not into surrender, but into something clean. I didn't replace you, she said, but I also won't let you break me again. Leo stared at her, trembling. Then what do I do? Claire exhaled, slow. You learn. You grow. You figure out what love costs when it's not free anymore. Leo's face crumpled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry. For a moment, the old Claire would have pulled him into her arms. She would have swallowed everything. She would have carried the guilt for everyone. But the new Claire didn't move. She let his apology exist without rewarding it. She turned toward the car. Ethan's voice followed her, hoarse and raw. Claire, don't do this. Claire paused with her hand on the door handle. Then, without looking back, she said, I'm not doing anything to you. A beat. I'm finally doing something for myself. She got into the car with Adrian, and as the door shut, the sound was soft, but it rang in Ethan's chest like a final verdict. Claire didn't answer him. Every strand of her focus was wrapped around the man in her arms. Does your head hurt? Her voice was urgent but soft, like she was afraid a louder sound might make him crack. Are you dizzy? Nauseous? Tell me the truth. Adrian, does it hurt? Adrian let out a quiet breath, then lifted his eyes to her with a look that was almost too gentle for the chaos they'd just survived. A little, he murmured. And then, As if he couldn't help himself, he leaned his temple against her shoulder. Shuddy, there was the faint metallic scent of blood, barely there, mixing with the clean, familiar smell of laundry on her coat. Strange and intimate at the same time, like something she hadn't realised she'd been longing for. A closeness that didn't come with a price tag. For a split second, while Claire wasn't looking, Adrian's mouth curved, not a smile for her, a smile for Ethan. A thin, razor-sharp thing, quietly victorious. His eyes slid toward Ethan like the tip of a blade meant to twist a little deeper into the other man's jealousy. Ethan saw it, and the rage in his face surged again, so violent it nearly became a second punch. Claire caught the movement before it happened. She rose in one swift motion, hands trembling, not from fear, but from fury she'd held in for far too many years. Her palm came down hard across Ethan's cheek. Crack. The sound rang through the restaurant so sharply people turned in shock, heads snapping like birds startled mid-flight. Ethan's head jerked to the side. For a moment, the room froze. The air itself seemed to stop breathing. "Ethan Shaw," Claire said, each word clean and cutting. "Do you really need to turn everything into a spectacle before you feel alive?" His cheek flushed red where she'd hit him, but the deepest pain wasn't there. It was in his chest, in that sick, hollow space where control used to sit. "Claire," he rasped. Her eyes were ice. "We're done, completely. From this day on, you do not get to step into my life, not even with your shadow." Ethan's jaw tightened, anger and disbelief warring on his face. "You're my wife, not his." Claire looked straight into him, and it was like watching a door close without a slam. "Did you not get the divorce papers?" she asked quietly. Ethan's expression faltered. "We're divorced," she said, the words landing like a final nail. "I didn't take your assets. I didn't fight you for Leo's custody. I gave you everything you wanted so you could stop clinging to me like I'm a possession." Her voice lowered, dangerous in its steadiness. "The only thing I asked for was peace. So if you keep harassing me, if you touch him again or follow me again, I will call the police." That last sentence wasn't a threat. It was a boundary drawn in permanent ink. Ethan stood rigid, the restaurant lights reflecting off the shadows under his eyes. His gaze reddened, wetness rising so fast he couldn't hide it. He'd thought he'd run out of tears years ago. He'd thought men like him didn't have the luxury, but grief didn't ask permission. Claire didn't spare him another look. She bent, took Adrian's hand, and helped him to his feet with a care so instinctive it made Ethan's throat close. Then she led him out, past stunned stares, past whispers, past the wreckage of a scene Ethan had created and could no longer control. Only when they were outside, away from the curious eyes and the clatter of plates, did Claire's breath finally shudder out of her. "I'm taking you to the hospital," she said, already scanning his face again. "Don't argue." Adrian made a show of wincing, letting his shoulder sag into her support. "I can walk," he said obediently. But his hand remained hooked over her shoulder. He did not let go, not for a second. In the car, Claire drove with both hands tight on the wheel. Every few minutes she reached over to touch his temple, gentle as a prayer, checking for dizziness, checking for pain, checking that he was still here. "Sit up a little," she instructed, voice firm with worry. "Don't lean on the window. You'll make it worse." Then, softer. "Are you cold? I can turn the heat up." Adrian looked at her from the passenger seat, letting her fuss over him like it was the most natural thing in the world. His cheek stung, sure, but the wound was nothing. He'd been able to dodge that punch completely. He could have blocked it, countered it, ended Ethan on the floor with one clean movement. Instead, He'd chosen to take it. Chosen to fall. Chosen to test something he didn't dare ask out loud. When two men stood in front of her, when the past and the future collided, who would she reach for? Now he had his answer. She hadn't hesitated. She'd pushed Ethan away like an intruder, and she'd lifted Adrian like he mattered. The joy that rose in Adrian's chest was bright and dangerous, almost drowning the sting on his face. He swallowed it down, watching her in the dim light of passing street lamps. Claire didn't realise it yet, but her heart had already chosen. At the hospital, the antiseptic smell hit her like an old ghost. For a fraction of a second, her stomach tightened, memories trying to climb up her throat. But then Adrian's hand found hers, steady, warm, present, and the fear loosened. The doctor checked Adrian quickly. Mild swelling, no concussion, no need to stay. When the words were finally said, "He's fine," Claire's entire body seemed to melt at once, tension draining out of her like water from a cracked cup. She sat on the edge of the exam bed, staring at the faint red mark on Adrian's cheek as if her eyes could erase it. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. Adrian's lashes lowered. He tightened his fingers around hers and leaned his head onto her shoulder again, shameless now, like a grown man, borrowing comfort he'd waited too long to claim. "Yeah," he said softly. "It hurts. A lot." Claire's brows knit instantly, guilt flashing across her face. "I'm sorry. If it wasn't for me, Ethan wouldn't—" "Claire." Adrian lifted his head. His voice dropped, turning serious in a way that made her stop mid-thought. "It doesn't hurt," he admitted. "Not really." Claire blinked. "What?" He exhaled, as if opening a locked room inside himself. "I didn't dodge on purpose," he said. "I let him hit me." Her eyes widened, stunned. "I needed to know," Adrian confessed, voice raw now. "Larble what you would do when you were forced to choose between two men, between your past and your present." He swallowed, then continued quieter. "And you chose." Claire's throat tightened. Adrian looked at her like he wasn't asking for pity, like he was asking for truth. "I've been jealous," he admitted, and there was no pride in it. "Jealous of your first marriage. Jealous of how you once tried so hard for someone who didn't deserve you. Jealous of all the years you spent waiting, hoping, bleeding quietly." His eyes reddened, but he didn't look away. "But I also understand. Everything you endured was real. It wasn't a story. It was your life." He reached up, wiping the corner of her eye with his thumb as if it was his right. "I swear to you," he said, voice steady despite the emotion, "I won't let you cry because of a man again. Not ever." Then, as if he couldn't help one last flicker of humour, he added with a hoarse little laugh, "If I could rewind 5 minutes, I should have let him land 2 more. Claire's laugh broke through her tears, half disbelief, half heartbreak. "You idiot," she whispered, tapping his forehead lightly. "Why would you let anyone hurt you? If you get injured again, I'm the one who'll suffer." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "I'm the one who'll suffer." Adrian froze. Then his mouth curved, not teasing this time, not sharp, not triumphant, tender, like the whole sky had softened inside his eyes. "Claire," he murmured, "if you're angry, hit me, yell at me, anything." He pressed his face into the hollow of her neck, voice breaking into something almost helpless. "I'm the one who was wrong, not you." Claire's arms tightened around him, holding him like she was holding a future she'd finally decided to step into. She breathed him in, blood and soap and warmth, until the last of the restaurant's ugliness felt far away. "Adrian," she whispered, voice trembling, "don't lie to me again." "I won't." he said immediately. I promise. Then he pulled back slightly, reaching into his jacket pocket. His fingers were steady, but his eyes weren't. He took out a small velvet box and opened it in front of her. Claire stared, confused, breath caught. Claire, Adrian said, and his voice was so gentle it hurt. You have to promise me one thing too. Her lips parted. What? He didn't answer with words. He slid the diamond ring onto her ring finger, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid the moment might shatter if he moved too fast. And the stone caught the fluorescent light, throwing it back in a bright, dizzying flare. Claire's eyes stung, her vision blurred. Adrian, she whispered, almost unable to breathe. Thank you for walking toward me, he said, quiet but heavy, like every syllable was placed straight onto her heart. At first, he admitted, I wanted this marriage because Luna needed you, because she chose you, and I thought, if my daughter had a good mother beside her, that would be enough. He looked down at her hand, at the ring now resting there, then back up into her eyes. But it's not enough anymore, he said, voice rough with sincerity, because He swallowed. I really like you, he confessed. Not as a responsibility, not as an arrangement, not as a solution. His thumb brushed her knuckles, reverent. I want to start over, he said. From love, not from duty. Please, let me into your heart. Tears slipped down Claire's cheeks, warm and unstoppable, falling onto the back of his hand like a quiet surrender. Her heart, locked and scarred and tired, finally cracked open just enough for light to enter. She looked at him for a long moment, searching for a reason to refuse, and found none. Okay, she whispered, nodding through tears. Okay, let's start over. From love. Adrian pulled her into his arms so tightly, it felt like he was afraid the universe might snatch her away if he loosened his hold, and in the shared rhythm of their breathing, the past receded. Not erased, just no longer in control.